My daughter pushed me, and I fell onto the wooden floor I had built with my own hands. Blood ran down the floorboards, and her words still echo in my head to this day. Don't embarrass me in front of my in-laws anymore. People thought I would sue, shout, or take revenge, but I did nothing. I simply stood up, wiped the blood from my brow, and began to rebuild my life with something she could not destroy: the truth. If you have ever been betrayed, ever been driven out of your home by the person you loved, stay with this story until the end. You will see that silence is not weakness. It is the quietest form of justice. My name is Harold Benton, owner of Benton Hardware in Fredericksburg, Texas. Thank you for listening, and thank you for believing that those who are silent can still make the whole world bow to the truth. I can still smell the pine burning in the hearth that night, that familiar scent for 30 years, since the day I opened Benton Hardware and Supply. Fredericksburg in late March is chilly, the ridge winds bringing the smell of wet earth and the sound of wind through the wooden porch. I reset the table, adjusted every knife and fork, feeling as if I were rearranging my life, neat, sufficient, and convinced I was still respected. Today was the 30th anniversary of the store, and I had intended to invite my daughter and her husband for dinner. But Vanessa said, "Let me handle it, Dad. I want to introduce you to the Halversons, my in-laws. They like to meet people who run a proper business." I smiled, naively proud that this was her pride. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the warm lights fell across the framed photos along the hallway. The 90s photo of me in front of the shop, hair still dark, hands on a saw. Vanessa came down the stairs in a wine-red dress, Greg following, adjusting his tie. Behind them were Mr. and Mrs. Halverson, aristocratic in the manner of upscale Austin. I stepped forward to greet them, my habitual gentle smile ready. "Welcome. I built this house with my own hands. Every board passed through my hands." Mrs. Claire Halverson gave a thin smile. It's rare to find someone who still does everything by hand. Before I could respond, Vanessa cut in with a hint of contempt. "Dad still likes to tell those old stories. Who does handcrafted furniture these days, Dad? People use laser cutters now." I forced a laugh, but it faded. When everyone sat, Vanessa took the seat at the head of the table, the seat I had held for 30 years. I froze. She spoke quietly, but like an order. "Tonight, let me host, Dad. You just sit there. I want the dinner to look a bit more modern." Greg laughed loudly. "That's right. The old man should retire and let the young ones run things. It's the TikTok era. Still doing notebooks and pencils. Who can keep up?" The table laughed. Their laughter mixed with the clink of cutlery, sounding like a saw blade scraping dry wood. I swallowed, the lump in my throat. I was about to say a few words about the shop, about recently signing a supply contract with Green Hollow Farm, something I was proud of, when Vanessa interrupted, her voice saccharine and sharp like vinegar. "Dad, don't tell those old stories anymore. People are here to hear about Greg's car dealership. No one cares about nails or hammers." The mood sank. Mr. Halverson forced a smile and raised his glass. "Ah, I heard Greg talking about opening a branch. Congratulations." Greg leaned back, speaking with the air of a benefactor. "Thank you. I learned from my father-in-law one thing: to move slowly, think old, and live so modestly that you are no longer competitive." The table laughed again. I remained silent. I heard the glasses clink, the aroma of prime rib growing richer as hot fat slid onto plates. Everything looked elegant, only my heart felt heavy. Vanessa sipped her wine and glanced at me as if I were surplus staff. "You don't need to make a speech, Dad. Everyone here knows Greg is the one carrying the family name." I looked up, the hanging lights reflected in my daughter's eyes, cold as steel. I slowly set my knife down, the metal striking the plate like the cracking of rotten wood. No one spoke. Mr. Halverson checked his watch, and Mrs. Claire feigned amusement. I took a deep breath and stood to clear the plates. Vanessa raised an eyebrow and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Let me handle it. Dad only makes a mess." There was a dead silence. I stood motionless, the wine glass trembling in my hand. Greg smiled, half mocking, half pitying. My father-in-law has a temper, but actually he's easily moved. I let the glass slip from my hand. It shattered on the floor. The crystal burst crisply, sounding in that elegant room like the breaking of an old door. No one helped me pick it up. I bent down and saw my warped reflection in the shards. From the corner of my eye, the warm lights wavered, their glittering world reflected on the floor, while I only saw myself in small pieces, mangled and silent. I murmured, "Thank you for the meal, dear. It was delicious." Then I turned away. No one stopped me. Only the slow ticking of the clock remained, like a heart counting down. I walked down the hallway. The smell of burning pine lingered, but the warmth it once had was now the smell of ash. Behind me, Vanessa's voice rose, small but clear. "You always act like that. No wonder I find it hard to introduce you to anyone." I paused for half a step. I said nothing, did not look back. I only tightened my grip until the tendons in my thumb stood out. Because I knew some words do not kill immediately, but that will keep someone alive long enough for them to begin a plan to set things right. The house was quiet after the guests left, the smell of roasted meat and wine mingling with the smoke of half-burned wood in the fireplace. I cleaned each plate, the faint clinking of porcelain echoing in the space. The warm light reflected off the oak table I had built by hand, now dotted with scratches. Each mark seemed to remind me that everything I had built was beginning to crack. I gathered the plates into the sink, rinsed them carelessly, then wiped the table. The dish soap's harsh, sweet scent made me think of the time when Vanessa was little, helping me wipe the table each night, her hands still sticky with paint. Now she only touched this table when she wanted to show power. I heard the click of high heels coming down the stairs, sharp and steady like hammer strikes. Vanessa appeared on the landing, her red dress glowing under the golden light. Her face was cold, stripped of any trace of tenderness. "Dad," she said, her voice dry like snapping wood, "don't talk to the Halversons about the store's money. Greg will handle it." I looked up, still holding the cloth. "The store's money is my business. If they ask, I have the right to speak. And Greg," she took a few more steps, her tone rising, "don't you get it? You just mess everything up. You keep bringing up old stories and embarrassing me. You know what they said? That you look like a poor retired handyman." I froze, not because of what she said, but how she said it, as if cutting every cord that once tied father and daughter together. I slowly set the cloth on the table and stepped toward the stairs, speaking softly. "Vanessa, you don't have to—" She interrupted sharply. "Stop embarrassing me in front of my in-laws. Do you think they don't see it? They said I'm pitiful for having a rustic father who talks about bolts and paint like some laborer. You really believe people respect you because of that rusty shop? Who needs an old man selling nails these days?" I shook my head, my voice hoarse. "Vanessa, you've gone too far." But before I finished, she swung her arm and shoved my shoulder hard. It wasn't an accident. It was loaded with pent-up resentment. Everything happened as fast as cracking wood. My back hit the banister, my foot caught the carpet's edge, and my body tumbled backward. I only had time to see the ceiling light spin before a sharp thud exploded. My head slammed into the wooden corner rail. The world tilted. A red blur spread across my vision. The sound in my head pounded like hammers, not once but dozens of times, echoing. I collapsed face down, hands trembling as they reached for air, grasping only the cold floor. Blood began to seep, streaming from my temple down my neck. The scent of burning pine mixed with the metallic tang of blood, creating a sweet, acrid smell that made me nauseous. I heard Vanessa's heels stumbling, her breath ragged, her voice trembling, but trying to stay calm. I didn't mean to. Dad, don't look at me like that." I opened my mouth, barely managing 2 words. "Vanessa, why?" When Greg appeared in the doorway, still holding his Wineglass, his face lazy and annoyed. "Oh, God, again? He fell by himself, Vanessa. Don't call anyone. He's always putting on a show." I struggled to push myself up, my head spinning, heartbeat pounding like drums. My fingers trembled so badly I misdialed twice before reaching 911. When the dispatcher's voice came through, I managed only, "I fell. Someone pushed me." Blood dripped onto the floor, each drop seeping into old cracks in the oak. Every drop reminded me the worst pain wasn't the fall, but that the one who pushed me was the child I once taught to take her first step. Blood slid between my fingers, soaking into the wooden floor I had polished for 20 years. The faint wail of sirens grew closer. As the red and blue lights flashed through the window, they reflected against the sign outside. Benton Hardware and Supply. Since 1993. I looked at that line, trembling as I thought, 30 years of sweat on every board, only for my own child to be the one who made me fall from the steps of that house. The door burst open, paramedics shouting, "Sir, can you hear me?" But their voices drifted away, blending into the wind over the hills. In the final blur of consciousness, I saw the flashing red light through the glass, flickering over the sign like the letters themselves were bleeding. I woke up under a blinding white light that felt like hundreds of blades cutting into my eyes. The hospital ceiling reflected the cold glare of fluorescent bulbs, and the sharp smell of disinfectant crept into my lungs. Every breath felt like it was wrapped in wire. It took me a few seconds to realize I was at Hill Country Memorial, my neck wrapped in white bandages, my head heavy as lead. A nurse with gray hair leaned over, her voice gentle but detached, like reciting a script. "Mr. Benton, the wound on your temple took 7 stitches. No skull fracture, but you need rest." The doctor said, "That must have been quite a fall." I just smiled, my cracked lips barely moving. "Yeah, higher than I thought." When she left, the room sank into silence. Only the heart monitor beeped steadily, like the old clock I used to hang in Benton Hardware. I turned my head to the side and saw my phone on the bedside table, the screen flashing over and over. The words, "Vanessa, 66 missed calls," glowed on it, the blue light flickering on the white wall like pulses of accusation. I didn't touch it, but the phone started ringing again. The sound pierced through the still room like a metal drill through wood. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it started again. This time, I put it on speaker, not because I wanted to hear, but because I wanted to know what she would say after pushing her father down the stairs. Vanessa's voice came through, trembling with fear. "Dad, I'm sorry. Please don't call the police, okay? I didn't mean it. Greg said I just need to apologize and it'll be fine." Close my eyes, my breathing uneven. That voice pulled me back years ago, when she was 8, her hair in 2 braids, running around the shop. I remembered that spring morning when she begged to help me cut wood. I handed her a metal ruler and said, "Look, each small line is 1/8 of an inch. If you measure wrong, the bridge will tilt. Whatever you do, say the wrong thing once and trust breaks like warped wood." She laughed, her eyes bright. Back then, I thought this child would carry the same honesty her father did. I was wrong. The phone rang again, but this time her voice was no longer trembling. It was sharp, like from a stranger. "Dad, I know you're listening. Stop being dramatic. Everyone knows you're weak. The doctor said it was an accident. If you say otherwise, people will laugh. They'll say you're making things up just to blame me." I said nothing. Outside the window, silver moonlight spilled over the hospital roof, glinting on the bandages around my head. The moon was too bright, the kind of light that appears only when you have nowhere left to hide. The phone rang a 3rd time. Her voice was different now, cold as steel. "Dad, I won't say it again. Greg already called the lawyer. If you make this public, we'll countersue. You should know who has the voice in this family now." I let her words echo until they faded. Each one felt like a nail driven into wood. Firm, cold, impossible to pull out. A while later, the nurse returned with painkillers. "Would you like me to call your family?" she asked. I smiled faintly, my voice rasping like burning wood. "No need. My family's probably busy calling their lawyer." When she left, I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the metal ruler. The only thing they hadn't taken. Its edges were worn and dull from years of use, the scratches still where I had once carved them. I lifted it toward the light. Faint letters emerged, built with truth. I ran my fingers along the engraved words, feeling their raised edges, cold as an epitaph. My old motto, "Built with truth," had once reminded my workers to measure right. Now it was a vow to myself. Outside, the night wind rustled through the cypress trees beyond the window, whispering. The sound reminded me of the tin roof above my store, where every rainy season I would sit and listen to the drops, tapping like the rhythm of justice, waiting to be awakened. That night, surrounded by antiseptic and white light, I murmured to myself, "You can call 66 times, but only one truth will call you back." I placed the ruler on my chest and closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw the years gone by, the smell of wood, the hum of the saw, the smile of the child who once held my hand in that small shop. But this time, when I opened my eyes, that smile had turned into resolve. Because some falls aren't meant to end things. They exist to begin a new kind of justice. 2 days after, being discharged, I returned to Fredericksburg. The town was still peaceful, but inside me, everything had changed. That night, I sat in a small cafe near the square, where people still talked about crops and weather as if nothing in the world was serious enough to keep them up at night. I ordered a black coffee with no sugar. The smell of burnt beans mixed with the scent of lacquered wood from the shop across the street, a smell that reminded me of my own store. Outside, the late afternoon sun streamed through the window, highlighting the fading bruise turning yellow on my temple. I was reviewing the hospital bill when a deep, familiar voice said, "Harold Benton, you still drink your coffee strong, like you used to." I looked up. Michael Trent, the man who'd once bought fencing materials from me more than 10 years ago, now a well-known attorney in Gillespie County. He set his briefcase on the table and sat across from me, his eyes sharp but kind. "I read about your hospital stay. Fell down the stairs, huh?" he asked, half joking, half probing. I simply replied, "It wasn't the stairs that pushed me." Michael was silent for a while, then spoke slowly, measuring every word. "I won't ask for details, but if you came here, I'm guessing you want to talk about how to stand back up." I nodded. I took a deep breath and began telling him everything. The dinner, my daughter's cold eyes, the shove on the stairs, the blood seeping on the wooden floor. I spoke without looking at him, staring instead at the coffee cup steaming like smoke from a fire long gone. When I finished, the room fell silent, broken only by the faint clink of a spoon against glass. Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression distant for a few seconds, weighing between emotion and reason. Then he said in a low, deliberate voice, "Harold, now I understand. You don't need to strike back. You just need to build a fence. People take revenge with emotion, but we defend ourselves with structure." He emphasized each word, his eyes steady on mine. "I'll help you create an irrevocable trust, a fund that can't be undone, where your assets are untouchable. The entire store, land, and principal accounts will transfer into the trust's name, with you still as the primary trustee. This isn't just defense, Harold. This is how you make them play by the laws they've disrespected." I listened, my heart both calm and aching. "You talk like I'm about to die." Michael gave a faint smile. "No, I'm talking like you're about to come back to life, legally." He pulled another sheet from his folder and quickly sketched diagrams, a layout of cameras around the shop, positions for lawful audio recording in public areas, and even the procedure for filing a civil incident report without naming who pushed me. You need to preserve evidence, not for revenge, but for structure. One day that structure will speak for you. I sat, quietly. The light from outside fell across my calloused hands, hands that once held a hammer, now preparing to sign legal documents. I asked softly, "What do you think I should do about her?" Michael studied me for a long moment, his eyes heavy. "I'm not saying cut her off, but you need to rebuild the boundary. No one gets to cross it, not even your daughter. And Harold, one more thing." He flipped through his file and pulled out a note clipped to a record. "Back in January, my clerk reported that someone came to the office, asking for a certified copy of the will you made in 2018. They didn't leave a name, just said they were family. I think it might have been Vanessa." I clenched the paper in my hand. "She knew I had a will, but she never asked for it." Michael nodded. "Maybe someone's preparing something bigger than you think. But don't worry. I'll check through the notary system and the county records office. We'll know what she's done, and with whom." I looked out the window. Fredericksburg was bathed in sunset, sandstone buildings glowing orange. On the street, a father and son walked by, the boy holding a plastic ruler, pointing at the carpentry shop across the way, and asking his dad about measuring wood. I saw myself in that image, a man who once taught his child how to measure truth, now having to relearn how to protect it. Michael slid a power of attorney form toward me. "If you trust me, sign here. I'll act as your legal representative, investigating all financial and legal activity tied to your assets. No noise, no press, just the truth." I picked up the pen, my hand still trembling. The tip touched paper with a faint scrape, a small sound yet clearer than any voice. When I finished signing, I said quietly, "I once built houses with good wood. Now I'll build fences with truth." Michael nodded, closing the folder, his glasses catching the light. "And you know, Harold, rotten wood can be replaced, but trust has to be shown to never crack." I didn't answer, just watched the light reflect off the now cold coffee. Outside, the sun sank lower, leaving streaks of red across the sky, the color of old blood drying, and of a quiet war about to begin. On Monday morning, I returned to Benton Hardware and Supply. The wooden sign hanging over the porch still bore scratches from last year's storm, but I hadn't come to repaint it. I came to begin again, not with paint, but with boundaries. I called Travis, a young technician who used to work for me back in high school. He arrived in less than 30 minutes, carrying his tool bag, a new Yale electronic lock, and 3 infrared security cameras. The moment he saw me, he asked, "Mr. Benton, was there a break-in or a robbery?" I just smiled, my eyes calm. "No, Travis. I just want to change the locks. Sometimes what gets stolen isn't an object, it's peace of mind." All morning, the sound of drills and screws echoed through the wooden hallways. I replaced every lock from the main door to the supply room and installed wide-angle cameras on the porch, above the sign and across the main room. On the wall, I posted a small sign. "This area is under camera surveillance." I placed it myself, aligning every edge so the word surveillance sat perfectly under the Benton logo. Looking at it, I felt a kind of safety I hadn't felt in a long time. 3 days earlier, Vanessa had sent me an email with a single line. "Dad, send me the original house documents for the insurance. Greg needs to submit them before Monday." I didn't reply. I knew well, if I handed over the originals, they could transfer or mortgage the property without my signature, and today I knew they would come for it. While Travis was checking the final wiring, the familiar black SUV rolled into the lot. Vanessa and Greg stepped out. Vanessa wore a white suit and sunglasses, her face cold, as if nothing had ever happened. Greg looked different, face flushed, eyes burning with anger. I wasn't surprised. I wiped my hands on a rag, stepped onto the porch, and stood tall. Vanessa spoke first. "Dad, I just came to get the house documents. The police said we need the original to file the insurance. I looked her straight in the eye. The house documents belong to the Benton Heritage Trust. I don't hold them, and I won't hand them over. Greg cut in, voice hoarse with rage. Don't twist things. That's my wife's house. You have no right to keep it. I remained calm, my tone low but firm. Get off my property, Greg. The air froze. The wind from the hills rattled the camera sign, creaking softly. Vanessa froze, while Greg roared, You dare talk to me like that? Then he slammed his fist against the door, the thud echoing across the porch. I didn't move. I didn't speak. 5 minutes later, a Fredericksburg Police Department patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out. One recognized me and nodded. Mr. Benton, is there a problem here? I pointed to the new camera above us. Nothing serious, officers. But if needed, I have full footage from 3 angles. Greg stammered, I just wanted to talk. The officer wrote something in his notebook, his voice flat. You struck another person's business property. This is a place of commerce, not a private home. You should leave. Greg shot a glare at Vanessa, growled, Let's go, then stormed into the SUV. The tires screeched over dry gravel. When the car disappeared, I turned back inside. Travis was still there, eyes wide. You okay, Mr. Benton? I nodded, answering softly, Better now. That afternoon, I sent all the footage to Michael Trent by email with a note. The first wall is up, he replied with just one line. Keep it that way. Not everyone who bangs on your door wants to get in. Sometimes they just want to see if you'll flinch. I sat down, looking around the store. The scent of pine lingered, light glinting off the countertop where my daughter's hands once rested. Everything was still, except for the faint click from the new lock, a small but solid sound, the final confirmation of a boundary now sealed. I looked up at the sign outside the porch. Benton Hardware in supply, since 1993. And in that moment, I realized, from now on, every click wouldn't just lock a door, but would lock away the past. A week after the confrontation at the store, morning in Fredericksburg carried the smell of damp rain and the sound of lumber trucks rumbling down Main Street. I had just finished brewing coffee when the postal truck stopped outside. The old mailman handed me a thick envelope stamped with the logo of Halverson and Myers, LLP, Greg's parents' law firm. I opened it, the scent of fresh paper mingling with heavy ink. The first line, bold and cold, read, Demand for compensation and cessation of defamatory conduct. I read each word slowly. They accused me of defamation and emotional harm toward Vanessa and Greg, demanding $50,000 in damages. The final paragraph warned that if I failed to respond within 10 days, they would escalate the matter to civil court. I set the paper on the table. My hands didn't tremble. Only a dry, bitter smile flickered on my lips. I called Michael Trent. He arrived within an hour, still in his white shirt and gray tie, carrying the calm demeanor of a man long used to seeing deceit dressed in legality. After reading the letter, he raised an eyebrow, then let out a low laugh, his voice rough but steady. Good. Very good, Harold. Now we have a trail. They've stepped into the light. We countersue. He pulled a blank file from his briefcase, scribbling the title. Civil suit, assault and battery, protective order. His tone was even, each word hitting like a hammer on a stake. You're not just defending yourself anymore. We're officially going on the offensive. A civil suit for domestic assault, plus a personal protection order. You fell. You were injured. There's medical documentation, camera footage, and police witnesses. It's no longer a staircase accident. I looked at him and asked quietly, Are you sure we have enough evidence? Michael nodded, his thin smile sharp as a blade. We have more than enough, and I'm adding another layer. I just contacted the Gillespie County Notary Office to retrieve the access logs for the will you signed in 2018. Every certified copy request is logged by ID and email. They said they'd send it today. That afternoon, the fax machine in Michael's office hummed and clicked. Page after page rolled out, each stamped in red. Certified request record, January 12th. In the section marked requester email, one line stood out clearly. Vanessa, Lane, halvorsenmyers.com. Michael nodded, studying it. She thought she could erase her trail, but the notary system doesn't lie. This is the key: motive, conspiracy, and action. He gathered the pages, stapled them neatly, and slid the file across the desk toward me. Your wall's getting higher, Harold. Each brick is a piece of evidence. They want $50,000? Fine. We'll make them pay with their reputation. I sat in silence, watching the printer in the corner still working. The yellow desk light reflected off each sheet as it dropped into the tray, the hum and click of the machine steady and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of someone regaining strength. When the final sheet slid out, Michael said softly, almost in a whisper, "Paper doesn't lie, Harold. It just waits for the right person to hold it." I nodded, picking up one sheet from the stack. The light caught the word Vanessa, bold and undeniable. I didn't feel pain anymore, only a strange calm settling inside me. Outside the window, the wind stirred the old oaks, dry leaves drifting to the ground, light as pieces of the past peeling away from my life, one page at a time. Early April in Fredericksburg burned bright and harsh. Sunlight poured through the front windows of Benton Hardware, falling across the oak desk where I sat. In front of me was a thick folder Michael Trent had sent that morning, a copy of the financial report from Hill Country Motors, the dealership under Greg Lane's name. Every page was filled with numbers, but what caught my attention wasn't the revenue figures. It was the note at the bottom of page 4. Commercial loan, $85,000. Personal guarantee, Gregory Lane. I set the paper down and drew a long breath. The scattered pieces were starting to align. The shove, the demand letter, the request for my will, all of it pointed to the same thing: money. Michael had called me earlier that morning, his voice calm but heavy as iron. I just checked the state of Texas UCC filings and the commercial credit registry. Hill Country Motors is flagged for delinquent payments over 90 days. I also called an old friend at Lone Star Bank. He confirmed Greg Lane has received 2 notices of default. If he doesn't pay within 45 days, the bank has the right to seize any personal asset he guaranteed. I'm afraid they're desperate for something big enough and easy enough to leverage. A chill ran down my spine. Something big enough, I repeated, my voice low. You mean my house? Michael exhaled audibly through the line. Now you see it, Harold. Sometimes the motive isn't hatred. It's a loan about to mature. That afternoon, I drove to Keller's supply yard, the same place I'd sourced hardware from since I was young. Old man Keller, sleeves rolled up, voice rough with tobacco, squinted at me and grinned. Haven't seen you in a while. Building a new fence? I answered quietly. No. I'm trying to find out who's been climbing over the old one. Keller scratched his head, half joking, half serious. You talking about Greg Lane? He was here last week asking about lumber prices for a chain of showrooms. Heard the banks pressing him hard. He bragged that his wife's side has his back. Big house, clean deed, could guarantee a commercial loan. I looked at him, repeating slowly, He said that exactly? Keller nodded. Yeah, he even added, My father-in-law signs anything as long as my wife asks. I thought he was joking. I didn't answer. I just stood there, listening to the wind whistle through the metal roof, the hammering from the workshop, and the cold creeping from my hands up my neck. When I left the yard, the afternoon sun still glowed gold, but everything in my eyes had turned gray. Back home, I poured a cup of black coffee. The bank file lay open on the table. I sat, turned again to page 4, and ran my finger across the words, personal guarantee. Each letter felt engraved into my mind. I spoke softly, my voice low and steady as steel. They don't want me dead. They just want me to sign. The words echoed through the empty room, sounding like wood cracking in fire. I stood and walked to the corner, where an old gray safe lay hidden beneath a rolled-up blueprint of the store. I entered the code. The click that followed was faint but clear, like the breath of metal waking after years of silence. Inside, among a few company papers, was a yellow envelope worn at the edges. I carefully pulled it out. Written across it in bold, firm ink were the words I'd written 2 months earlier. Trust draft, Hollow Ridge. I set the envelope on the desk and stared at it for a long moment. Outside, the sky was turning to dusk, the last light of day streaming through the window, glinting off the word trust like a band of gold on fire. I knew then, from this moment on, the fight was no longer about the house. It was about the dignity of a father pushed to his limit. I closed the safe. The final click rang through the room. Short, sharp, and certain, like a promise that the truth was about to unlock itself, at the right time, in the right place, and by the right hands. That morning, the sky over Fredericksburg gleamed like polished steel. I arrived at the Trent & Associates office 15 minutes early, holding the old leather briefcase I had used for 30 years. Michael Trent was already waiting. He wore a white shirt and a dark tie, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the sunlight spilling through the window. On the desk before him lay a thick stack of documents neatly aligned, the corner clipped with a metal fastener engraved with my name. "This is the original," Michael said, his voice low but precise. "Irrevocable Living Trust, Harold Benton, settler and trustee." He opened the first page, his finger tapping gently on the bold print. "All real and personal property, described in Schedule A, shall be transferred to the trust, effective upon signing." I followed his hand. Below it was a long list. Benton Hardware, 124 Main Street, residential property, Hollow Ridge Road, tools, machinery, inventory. Every entry was something I had built over a lifetime. Michael continued, "All assets will be placed under the trust's ownership, but you remain the life tenant, entitled to live in, use, and manage everything for the rest of your life. Only upon your death will the estate transfer officially to the Hill Country Shelter Foundation, the same organization you've quietly supported every year." I nodded. It made sense. I would still live in the house I built, but from now on, every brick and beam would carry new meaning. After me, it would no longer be a place that witnessed betrayal, but a refuge for those fleeing pain. No one knew that story except me. And one anonymous letter, once sent to the foundation, reading, "From someone who once stayed silent too long." Michael turned to page 3, where the exclusion of heir clause was written. He read slowly, almost like a whisper. "No distribution or benefit shall be made to Vanessa Lane or her descendants. The trust includes a no contest clause. Any challenge shall result in forfeiture of any nominal bequest." My heartbeat slowed. My daughter's name was struck clean and bold, carved out like an etching on cold stone. Something inside me tightened, not out of anger, but out of sorrow, for the child I once taught to measure wood with a metal ruler, to balance the saw, to say thank you when a customer gave her extra change. Michael slid the pen toward me. "Sign here, here, and at the bottom." I took the pen. The tip met paper, the soft scrape echoing through the still room. Each stroke felt like chiseling a line into the family's history, separating right from wrong, but not erasing love. When I reached the final page, Michael opened a drawer and took out a red notary seal. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. "Ready?" I nodded. The seal came down. The sharp thump resonated, brief, firm, final, like a hammer striking hardwood, marking the line between what was and what would be. The scent of ink, paper, and metal mingled thickly, like a contract carved into permanence. Michael looked up. "From now on, no one can touch what you've built. They can hire lawyers, they can threaten, but they can't breach this wall. And if they try, we have the footage, the letters, and enough evidence to protect it all." I said nothing. I closed the file, wiped the fresh ink from my fingertips, and slipped the pen back into my briefcase. As I stepped outside, the noon sunlight fell across the stone steps, glinting off a brass plaque engraved with the words, "Built with law, held by truth." I paused, looking down at my hands, the same hands that once trembled after the fall, the same hands that held a hammer, that once lifted my little girl onto a workbench. Now they were steady. I murmured softly, only for myself to hear, "They once thought this hand was shaking. Now this very hand will close the door." And as the office door shut behind me, the hallway wind echoed faintly, cold but calm. An old chapter had ended. A new fence had been built, one made of justice, truth, and patience. May in Fredericksburg was dry and still, as if the town itself were holding its breath. The Texas flag above the Gillespie County Courthouse didn't stir an inch. I walked through security with a folder in my hand. Benton v. Lane, case number 24G231. It was a strange feeling. The very courthouse door frames I had helped weld 20 years ago, back when I worked for a local contractor, were now the same ones I walked through as a plaintiff against my own daughter. Michael Trent walked beside me, posture straight, steps slow and deliberate. "Stay calm, Harold. Today's only the first hearing. We present evidence, not verdicts," he murmured. I nodded. The courtroom was small, the ceiling high, the smell of old wood thick in the air. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat in a gray dress, her face cold as stone. Greg sat beside her, eyes darting away when I looked. In front of them sat a young man with glossy hair and a brand-new briefcase, their attorney, Carson Miles. Judge Eleanor Whitaker, silver hair, gravelly but steady voice, skimmed the case file and nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Trent." Michael rose. He didn't need notes. His voice was clear, firm, composed. Piece by piece, he laid out the truth. Photos of my head wound, taken at Hill Country Memorial, the 911 call made at 9:43 p.m. on the night of the incident, the security footage showing Greg pounding on the door and police arriving to file a report, the notary access logs proving Vanessa's attempt to obtain a certified copy of my will, and the $50,000 threat letter. When the injury photo appeared on the screen, the room went silent. The gash, 7 stitches running down my temple, glowed crimson under the light. I didn't look up, but I heard people inhale sharply around me. Then Michael played the short clip from the in-home camera. Vanessa's voice echoed sharp and metallic. "Dad, stop embarrassing me in front of my in-laws." Then came the sound of impact, body hitting wood, glass shattering, and one more sentence that made the entire room freeze. "Don't embarrass me in front of my real parents." The words sliced through the air like a blade. 1 second, 2, then total silence. I could hear the faint ticking of the courtroom clock and felt myself hollow out, like burned wood. The judge lowered her glasses, her raspy voice firm. "Enough!" She signaled to cut the video, then turned toward the defense. "Mr. Miles, do you have anything to say?" The young lawyer fumbled, his voice breaking. "Your Honor, my client only reacted under family stress." The judge interrupted. "Stress is not an excuse for pushing one's father down the stairs." The second hearing took place in July, after all witnesses, the locksmith, the responding patrol officer, and the bank representative verifying Vanessa's email, had testified one by one. I sat quietly, listening to every word. No objections, no apologies. Only cold sentences and the harsh white glow of fluorescent lights on the wooden witness stand. When the verdict came, Judge Whitaker read slowly, each word deliberate. "The court finds the assault claims substantiated. A 2-year protective order is hereby issued. The defendants are to reimburse medical expenses of $4,200, and the defamation countersuit is dismissed in full." I rose. No one in the room spoke. Vanessa bowed her head. Greg gripped his briefcase tight. I turned to the judge, my voice trembling but steady. "Your Honor, I don't want my daughter jailed. I just want peace." Judge Whitaker looked at me and nodded gently. "You'll have that, Mr. Benton." Outside, summer sunlight glared off the courthouse steps, gleaming against the brass plaque that read, "Gillespie County Courthouse, Justice Through Law." I paused, watching the line of weary faces waiting for their turn inside, each carrying stories no one else would ever know. Michael placed a hand on my shoulder. "It's done, and you kept the one thing that matters, your dignity." I just nodded. In my mind, Vanessa's recorded words, "Don't embarrass me," replayed, but they no longer hurt. They were proof that justice may be silent, but it never loses its voice. On the drive home, the wind brushed past the old sign outside Benton Hardware and Supply, since 1993, its paint fading under the sun. In the distance, the wooden house on Hollow Ridge stood quietly among the trees, waiting. I reached out and touched the sign, and peace settled over me. There was no need to defeat anyone, only to preserve the truth, because sometimes the highest form of justice isn't in the shout. It's when the whole world falls silent and still understands. A month after the trial, Fredericksburg had changed seasons. The first summer rain fell, washing the dust off the rooftops and, in a way, scrubbing a little of the shame my family had left on this small town. But some stains don't live on walls. They live inside people. News spread faster than I expected. Lone Star Bank officially repossessed Greg's dealership, Hill Country Motors. The local paper printed the headline in bold: "Local auto dealer defaults on loan, assets repossessed." The photo beneath showed tow trucks hauling cars away from the showroom under rain and flashing red lights, and me. The man once called the outdated old fool sat in my Hollow Ridge cabin reading that article beside a cup of coffee gone cold and the sound of rain tapping against the window. The Halvorsons, Greg's wealthy in-laws who once looked down on me, quickly posted a statement on Facebook. "We are not associated with, nor do we condone the misconduct of our daughter-in-law, Vanessa Lane." Underneath, hundreds of comments, some pitying, some mocking. I didn't finish reading. I just felt tired. Honor, once dragged into public, is rarely cleansed by apology. One Monday afternoon, while I was checking inventory logs in the workshop behind the house, a knock came at the door. I glanced at the monitor. Vanessa stood outside the gate, wearing a thin coat, holding a paper bag. I didn't open it. She knocked again, then shouted, "Dad, I just want to talk." Her voice was hoarse, shaking from the rain. Watching her on the screen felt like a blade twisting in my chest, but the protective order was still in effect. I called Sheriff Dale Crawford, a longtime customer at my store. "She's at my gate, Dale," I said. "I don't want trouble. Just need you to come." 10 minutes later, a patrol car arrived. 2 officers stepped out, spoke softly with Vanessa. She resisted, cried, then finally gave up. They cited her for violating the restraining order and issued a $500 fine. I watched from behind the glass door as red and blue lights shimmered in puddles. The siren faded into the night. After they left, I went back to my desk. The old ledger from Benton Hardware lay open, its pages yellowed. The numbers leaned crooked, written by hands that trembled more each year. I looked at the last line, the date marked today, and whispered to myself, "The price of silence is loneliness, but it's still cheaper than betrayal." Outside, the rain eased. I stepped onto the porch where the wooden sign I'd rehung after repainting swayed gently in the damp wind. The air carried the scent of fresh paint and earth. On the board, the words Benton Hardware and Supply, since 1993, were bold again, the black lettering beneath newly carved, built with truth. I stepped back, watching the word truth glow under the fading light, etched as if forever. I smiled faintly, closed the door, turned off the light. From afar, Fredericksburg's main street murmured with traffic, vendors, and the laughter of children outside an ice cream shop. And I, alone in the old house, surrounded by wood, paint, and memory, finally understood. Every closed door exists to protect the one thing worth keeping inside, the truth. That September, Fredericksburg softened after weeks of heavy heat. Afternoon fell slowly over the tin roof, sunlight spreading across the concrete floor like a coat of paint not yet dry. In the small workshop behind my wooden house on Hollow Ridge, I was labeling the last crates, the tools, drills, and measuring boards I was sending to the Hill Country Shelter Foundation, the place I had chosen to receive what remained of my life's work. No customers, no employees, just the steady rhythm of a light hammer and the slow breath of a ceiling fan turning above a house, long accustomed to solitude. I bent over to check a label when the old landline suddenly rang, its sharp tone echoing through the still air. 4 rings. 5. I almost let it stop, but my hand reached for it anyway, as if instinct already knew who would be on the other end. Benton Hardware, this is Harold. The voice that came through was shaky, ragged, heavy with tears. Dad, it's me. I froze. That voice had filled my life. Once the sound of Sunday mornings and a child laughing as she ran around the store. Now it carried the smell of ashes. Dad, Greg left me, she said, her voice scraping the air. The dealership's gone. The bank took the house. I have nothing left. I just wanted to ask. Her voice cracked. Am I still in the will? I leaned on the workbench, hearing the wind hum faintly through the line. Outside the doorway, late sunlight slanted in, gilding the sealed crates in gold. I took a deep breath and spoke slowly, clearly. No, you're not in the will anymore. I paused, then added softly, weary but honest, but you still have a father, if you can find a real apology. Not to earn forgiveness, but to start again. Silence followed, a silence so deep I could hear the faint whine of the wire in the line. Then a shaky breath, a stifled sob, and a half-broken word. Dad, The sound fractured, and then a click. The line went dead. I stood still, my hand gripping the receiver, feeling something dissolve in the air. Not anger, not hatred, just a sorrow so complete it no longer needed to stay. I set the phone down and turned back to the bench. Before me was the largest crate, filled with the tools I once used to teach Vanessa how to measure, saw, and fit hinges. Now they would go to strangers, people rebuilding their lives, just as I had hoped my daughter might someday do. I picked up a pen and wrote on the label in bold letters, "For delivery, Hill Country Shelter Foundation." I sealed the lid. Each hammer strike landed firm and final, yet instead of pain I felt lighter. The sound of a truck engine rumbled outside. A young driver in a baseball cap smiled. "Mr. Benton, we'll get these to the center tomorrow morning. They'll be grateful. Those folks really need the tools." I nodded. "No," I said quietly. "They're helping me clean out my heart." They loaded each crate onto the truck, the thump of wood on steel like a steady heartbeat. When the truck started, sunlight pierced through the dust, glinting off the black paint on the sign, "Benton Hardware, built with truth." The breeze made the sign sway gently, creaking like the old house whispering its gratitude. I stood there a long time, watching until the truck disappeared, and only the fractured light on the pavement remained, my shadow stretching long across the concrete. Then I spoke softly, as if to the wind itself. "You can lose everything, Vanessa, but if your heart is true, I'll still be here, waiting for an apology." I turned back inside and closed the wooden door. Sunlight streamed through the crack, lighting the word truth on the sign. And in that moment, I understood. Justice can build the fence, but only forgiveness can open the gate. And today, I left that gate open, just wide enough for one lost soul to find her way home. 2 months later, autumn came to Fredericksburg. The wind from the hill country carried the scent of pine and the dry crackle of old oak branches. The wooden house on Hollow Ridge still stood there, quiet and steadfast, a witness to time itself. Since transferring the store and all my assets into the trust, My life had narrowed to small things: brewing morning coffee, fixing a squeaky hinge, writing a few lines in an old notebook. I still lived here, like a caretaker waiting for time to reclaim the key. One morning in early November, the mailman knocked on the door. In his hand was an envelope bearing the logo of the Hill Country Shelter Foundation. I opened it. Inside was a letter printed on clean white paper, embossed in the corner with the foundation's seal. Dear Mr. Benton, the property you donated has been officially recorded under the terms of the trust. Renovations will commence upon the conclusion of your life tenancy. During this period, the foundation will proceed with legal and architectural preparations without altering your current residence. I placed the letter on the table. Outside, the sun had just risen, cutting through the pine branches and spilling patches of gold across the tiled floor. This room once held shelves of tools. Now it contained only a few chairs, one table, and an old photograph on the wall. Vanessa, at 8 years old, standing beside me in the store, both of us smiling, holding a measuring rule. That same metal rule still rested in the drawer where I'd left it. I took it out. The engraving was faint, but still legible. Built with truth. I sat down, opened my journal, and wrote the final entry. The blue ink soaked into the yellowed page, the lines trembling slightly but steady. Justice doesn't shout. It measures like a carpenter's rule, straight, patient, and exact. Outside, autumn rain began to fall. The sound of raindrops on tin echoed in steady rhythm, not loud, not soft, like the heartbeat of a house still alive. I closed my eyes and listened, letting the sound fill the room. A farewell, a thank you. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I saw women stepping through the doorway of Hollow Ridge, carrying children, worn backpacks, fear, and a small spark of hope. They looked around and saw a new brass plaque hanging beneath the porch light. Hill Country Shelter, in memory of Harold Benton, built with truth. A child ran forward, touched the plaque, and laughed. The sound was bright, like wind chimes, and I smiled without meaning to. As the wind stirred the curtain, I closed the journal. No other will was needed. Everything had already been written, in wood, in sweat, and in silence. Outside, the rain kept falling, a calm, even rhythm, the heartbeat of justice. And now you've heard my story, the story of an old craftsman once pushed down by his own child, who still chose to stand again with truth instead of hatred. I no longer have a store or the hammer's morning echo, but I have something greater, peace. If you've ever endured injustice in silence, remember, justice doesn't need to shout. It only needs someone willing to keep their rule straight, even when their hands tremble. Leave a single dot if you believe that truth remains the strongest material in every house life builds. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. I am Harold Benton, and this is my story, the story of a man who learned to measure life again with honesty. See you in the next story, where justice will still be quiet, but will always be heard.